approach to learning these soft skill will be how to place it with what you already know, because if you try to learn everything from scratch it may be very difficult. So I will try to put it as what you already know and how can you improve from that respect. So broadly, to understand what are the research skills, it can be divided into 5 parts. There are many other topics, but to keep it simple, we have focused on these 5 points. So in this talk, I will try to cover particularly 2 points, because it is already 9 p.m. in your place. So I will keep it short in that way. So first is, what are presentations, how to give a good technical presentations, and so some of the points will be overlapping with how you give a good interview. Like in interview, you'll also have to present, but not maybe the slides, but some of these skills will be overlapping also. And second, I will talk about you the general life cycle of a research project. So some of you may have already have experience, like you may have worked at some research internship, or in your masters you may have tried to like write a paper and you have submitted or in the process of submission. So these 2 points will help you get started in that way. So the first point we'll try to cover is how to deliver technical talks. So you will see there are many materials, or if you follow TEDx or any lectures, you will see people are delivering talks. But what are the key points that they keep in mind when they start preparing for it? Like so that, and so when you listen to someone's talk, it is like very boring for some people. For others, talks are very engaging. So what are the key points that differentiate them, and what you can incorporate when you prepare your next talk? So the first and foremost is start preparing early. So usually when you do technical talks, like I can say for my regard, so it is regarding when you are presenting your work. Suppose you have written a paper, it has got accepted, and you now want to present this work to uh, an international audience. So there you have to have very sound knowledge of what you are presenting, because there will be questions from that regard. So the best first approach you should keep in mind is to start preparing early. What do I mean by start preparing early is that, suppose you have a paper with you ready, or any paper, so you can understand these, whatever I'm telling, it is little bit focused to computer science research in that way. So it may be generalized, but I do not have so much experience to generalize it. So but I have somewhat experience in computer science research, so it is particular to that in that way. So suppose you have a paper, and what you can do is that if you go through a structure of a paper, which we can go in details in the future seminars, you will see that it has an abstract, it has an introduction part, it has related works which will cover what are the other works in that domain. Then you will have your methodology, followed by your experiments, and at the end, conclusion. So when you are trying to prepare a presentation given this paper, at the start you can follow the same format. So you can prepare a first draft, meaning the start will be your motivation, then it will say the next 2 slides will be your related works, next 3 slides will be your method, next 3 slides will be your experiment. So first approach is to put whatever content is out there that you feel is necessary. So here you do not need to budget down, say okay, I will keep this or I will keep that. So here the idea is to put all the content that you think is necessary in the presentation. Once that is done, you now need to think how much time you have, who is the audience that is listening to your talk. For example, the audience can be either a non-technical audience, like suppose you want to explain your work to your parents or to your friends. There your audience is non-technical, they have some knowledge but not fully complete knowledge. In comparison, you are presenting it to your lab members or to the conference, so there the audience is from a good technical background. Therefore, your content should be modified based on the audience in that way. The third point is that um, so this is also audience focused, meaning whenever we listen to a talk, like since everyone is busy in their life, what they do is that uh, suppose they have read the abstract of the paper and they were interested, and now they have come to listen to the talk, right? Now, after listening to the first 2 minutes, he will decide whether he wants to continue listening to his talk, or will he continue doing his other work or go to some other talks or something else. So this first 2 minutes is very crucial uh, for your presentation. In the first 2 minutes, you should cover the main motivation of the problem, which is like, suppose, like if I give an example like of hate speech, like there are some works on automatically detecting hate speech from social media. So your motivation slide should be, say, some news article clippings. See, hate speech because of this thing, it has resulted in some uh, offline event. Uh, these are some recent events. These many people were hurt because of this. Um, then you can show that, see, it is not only in India but in worldwide. These are the problems. So you can show some news articles that will immediately capture your audience. That is the motivation part. Next, you try to identify the research gap. So in your paper, you would have written the literature survey, or what have existing people done to solve that particular problem, right? Then you try to propose, see, these things people have already done, but then you have to critique it. Critiquing means that to understand what has been done and what has not been done, meaning the limitations of the existing works. That is called identifying the research gap. Finally, we'll say that, see, in the existing work, there are these three research gaps. In this paper, I will try to solve only one of them, and that will define my problem statement. So this entire thing should be briefly covered in 2 minutes, so that people are actually excited that, okay, I want to listen to this talk or not. And then you can go into details like, okay, my method has these things. So this should be covered in the first 2 minutes. So next points will be like, since it is a presentation, and a key point of your presentation is that you as a speaker is there to guide the audience. Meaning, if you have developed some model and the model has many parts to it, but when you are presenting to an audience, you need to cover only the main parts of the, like what you think is the main part of the model or the main novel part of the model that the speaker should know. So the idea is that you need not cover all the details in the paper or all the details of whatever the technical report you've made, but you have to make him excited enough or interested enough so that he later downloads your report and reads through it. So the idea is not to cover everything that is in your report, but the idea is to cover the main points of your report, which are important takeaways, that okay, he'll feel, okay, these are important points, but to know more, I need to read the paper. So what this will do that, first of all, your presentation would not be too long. Second, your presentation will have, say, 2 to 3 key points which you are repeating and which you are kind of cementing. So at the end of the day, when your presentation ends, the audience will know that, okay, this was the problem statement on each which we worked, and these are the 3 important points I have learned. What they mean important point? Suppose you developed a model, and suppose in my case what I have done is that, so there is this medical domain knowledge that exists, meaning that, say, suppose you have neck pain. So neck pain has a medical concept name attached to it. Now, regarding the neck pain, neck, it is associated with neck. So neck has a physical location in your body. Now, neck is associated with your head, then with your vertebra, then with your upper part of the body. So these information are present in some knowledge base. Now, I extracted that information and I'm telling that, See, these deep learning models, when they are initialized, they are randomly initialized. But instead of randomly initializing them, if I somehow use this existing knowledge that is collected by the doctors to somehow make a better starting point, or instead of random, I am making it semi-random. So then it will converge faster. So the one key takeaway from my paper will be that by incorporating this domain knowledge in some way, you need not explain the complete details in the start. In the middle, you will explain in the methods part, but in the start, you are saying, I incorporated domain knowledge, and one advantage was that it required less training time, meaning it converged faster. So this will keep him interested, and then he will listen to the entirety of your talk. And the final part will be that give a practice talk. So why is this important? Usually when you go to present something, it can be a conference, it can be some programming conferences like PyCon, um, like PyData that is held in that way. So you will have a time limit there. Suppose your talk is 10 minutes. Whenever you have prepared the presentation to the best, now you try to give the talk to yourself and record it. So you will usually see that it will take like little, like it is like 2-3 minutes are taking more. And when you listen it back, you will understand that which part of the slide is taking more time. Is more time necessary for that of the slide? Is the result that is explained, is it so crucial for the audience or not? So if it is interesting for the audience, if it is very important for the paper, you will allot the time accordingly in proportional to your importance that is considering, right? So this, when you give a practice talk, this helps you understand where you are going slow, which slide you are giving much more time than is necessary, and where you should fasten or where you should be slow. Suppose the method part, you should be slow and uh, explain each of them. So another component of practice talk is once you are done with it, you should give the talk to someone who does not know. Like it can be your parents, it can be your friends. You just give a practice talk to them and ask them what they think, how much they have understood, which part they liked, which part they did not like. So this is also called as critical analysis, where you try to understand from the presentation level uh, what are the drawbacks and how you can improve on it, right? So in general, there are many other like videos or lectures to give how to give good talks. But if you keep this in mind, and I think you all of you have some experience already to make presentations for different purposes. If you try to incorporate these points and try to see how you can improve them. So you can go through your past presentation, see with respect to these points, are they maintained or not, and see how you can incorporate these points in that way. So in this respect, what I have done is that, so in my GitHub repo, I have provided all the slides that I had presented till date, like it is over 3-4 years, wherever I have presented. It can be in conferences, it can be in IIT Kharagpur, the reading groups, or it can be in other places also. So there I have like provided the slides. So what you can do is that you can see the recent ones, try to do a critical analysis. Critical analysis meaning using these points as a starting board, and try to see which part you liked, what you think was missing, and how it can be improved. So so that will help you understand uh, what is a like a general template people use to work on the slides in that. And in this part, I will say that I wanted to make the session more interactive. That means that most of the soft skills, uh, there are some objective points or objective ways you can improve your presentation, but it is also a subjective field, meaning with experience and the more you give, you will get a better view of the presentation. So this comes to we come to the end of the first part of the talk, that is how to deliver good technical talks. The second part that I will try to go into briefly is uh, how to develop a research project. So again, it will be mostly based on data science or AI related uh, domains. But if you guys are interested in something else, you can just tell me towards the end. I can then try to see which part can be generalized to that. Okay. So given, let us consider first that we are working on a machine learning based research project. So we have, so what do we need to start first of all? So first you have to choose a domain. So when you are talking about a research article, so or a research project as a whole, so there are many components to it. So one thing that you have to learn is that it has to be somewhat focused, meaning since you are trying to create new knowledge, it is a very difficult thing. So at the start only you need to think, okay, which part will I focus on and which part will I do it later. So this is called, comes under both time management as well as resource management. So based on what you already know or what you have a knack in, maybe you have done your MTech project on that, you have done some courses on some of them, you choose any one of them. Usually people chooses text, vision or graphs or speech. Any one of them you can choose. And you have to stick with that for the initial projects, because at the start you, since you do not have much idea of what this entire research process is, you have to first decide on one and then go on from that. So suppose I have chosen text, like my research domain is text, but you guys can choose text, vision meaning images or videos. Graphs have recently also gone a lot of um, uh, what is a lot of importance. So the good thing is now is that for each of these domains, tutorials are very nicely given and they are generally open source, meaning so whenever they do these conferences, the conferences, one of the part of the conference is called tutorials, where the domain experts in certain fields give a long talk on say a very particular part, say like deep learning with graphs, and they make the slides and the YouTube video available. So so there is like it, there is no gap like okay you have to buy this book to get started. So most of these materials are, or almost all of the materials are freely available in that way. So the first point is to choose one of the domains. Second is that you need to know the basics of machine learning and deep learning. So what do I mean by basics? By basics I mean that the like if you talk about machine learning, what the basics will be, that the different types of learning algorithms, um, how does the most common like decision tree support vector machines, and you will have many courses on that, I think. And many of you may have already done of those courses, so these courses may have some projects, so that will help you to get the basics correct. Like, so when you so a difference between doing a research application and a research project is that your basics need to be very strong, not to be super strong but significantly strong, because you are trying to create new knowledge, because whatever you are trying to do no one has done before. So uh, you have to improve on that, and to improve over something that is not there, you have to really understand how, why the existing models are failing. So there the understanding about these models are important. So what can be a common way to understand that? Suppose in deep learning you have recurrent neural network and convolutional neural network, and overall understanding will be that in which cases are RNNs good, which cases are CNNs good. Okay, CNNs are good. Then when is CNNs bad? Does it depend on the amount of data? Does it depend on the domain on which it is being trained? Suppose the training data is from one domain, and but I do not have much data of a particular task which I want to do. Can I utilize this data from another domain to improve the performance. What are the relationship in the task that should satisfy? I mean, when it is learning, why is the performance improving? So suppose you have a machine learning classifier, say an SVM. Now you are using a deep learning classifier. Why is the performance increasing? Will it always increase? Or in some cases, it may decrease also. If it decreases, what are the next, how to check that? Means how to debug these deep learning or machine learning models. So this understanding will come when you have the basics clear, and then through the projects that is given in those tutorials or in those courses, you try to work on the real world data, and in that way you try to debug and see how your performance increases, right? So the second point is basics of machine learning and deep learning should be clear. It need not be super strong, but it should be clear, means you understand the different modules. Third is having like Python and a deep learning framework like ready, like you can use it. So why PyTorch? It is because the codes are very easy to write. It is very modular, meaning um, so you do not need to write many lines of code, but there is one function that you can call, and it is very easy to modify those functions. Meaning the source code is very easy to modify also. And most of the code bases that are made available in the research papers, they are usually written in Python, in PyTorch, the deep learning ones. So in terms of programming language, Python and PyTorch are like you must know. Then there is a programming language called R, which you may or may not know. For example, I use R a lot. So I combine when I do any project, I combine both of them. But it is not like it is like necessary to do with R. Like, so R is optional. It will help you. It will easily help you to like, manipulate the data a lot. Means when you explore the data, R is very useful. Like it is very short command. Whereas Python, you can write long when you are fixed with that. Okay, this is the model I want to go. This is the pre-processing steps I want to go. Then Python is very effective. But standalone Python also works, right? Fourth point is Git commands. Like since you will be usually working with some code bases uh, of existing papers, so you need to have a good command on the Git languages. So what is Git? Git is called as a version control, meaning when you develop a code base, it can have it will have different versions. Meaning, so you have a starting code base, and then you try to you say modify one part of the code, and then you store the existing code that you have already written. So if at any point of time you see that your code is not running because of this, because of the new commit, you can roll back to the existing version. So this is called as version control, which is very necessary for when you are writing code in that. So given that point in mind, so let us now go over the mindset or the life cycle of a research project. So you are starting and you are so you want to do a research project. You will have some machine deep learning knowledge. You will have some Python knowledge or some programming experience. But the second point that I have written, that is strengths, this is very important. What do I mean by strength? Is that you as an individual are better than the next student in certain respects. Suppose you can write very good code or you can easily understand code bases. That is an extra skill that you have. Or you can easily learn a new framework and you can easily port an existing code to that. Or you are very good at creating new ideas. So very new ideas come to you very easily in comparison to the other student. So this will be your strength. Why is this required? Is that when you take a research project, it is a long-term process. Why? Because you do not know whether it will be successful or not. Meaning, if you take a suppose you try to add a novelty to the problem, you do not know for sure whether that will improve the model or not. Therefore, it requires, when you start a research project, to complete it, it requires a lot of determination and a long-term thinking. And to sustain that, you need to really work on your strengths. So whenever you choose a research project, meaning that I told you the 4 points, that the domain you need to first choose, go with the one which you think you have the strength. Do not try to go into something which you don't know about. For a research project, always play to your strengths when you are selecting a particular topic. There is learning involved, but play to your strengths. And this you have to identify, and this will determine what type of projects you choose in that way, or which domain you choose in that way. Okay. So now, once you have the domain in mind, and now you try to find, so the first step of a research project is the problem ideation. So I will go by taking an example. So at the start, I told that there is this concept of hate speech detection. So how do you come up with this idea of this? So now suppose you have chosen, okay, I want to work on text. Now you have to come up with a problem idea. If you work with some supervisor, he may tell you, okay, you have to work on clustering, or you have to work on this particular data set. So there the problem is already given to you. But if the problem is not given to you, how do you come up with a problem, a research problem that is worth working on? The step to do that will be, first identify top conferences. So this is important because suppose you have now chosen text, we know that, so there is some metric by which we know what are the, say, top 4 conferences in the world in, say, text, that is in NLP, the top 4 conferences there, and that list is publicly available. So most top conferences are open source and you can access that data. And if you cannot access that particular paper, if you search in Google Scholar, you will get a archive link of it. So I will cover the details in other slides in future, but in general, you go to these top conferences, you will have the list of accepted papers, and you can do some kind of keyword searching. Suppose you like text, but you also like social media. So just search using social media and see what are the paper that comes up. So suppose you like, say, Reddit, just type Reddit. You like Twitter, you type Twitter. See what are the words that come on Twitter. For example, I will like health. So I will write health or medical or clinical, um, gene. So I will search with these keywords, and using these keywords, I will be able to identify what are the papers that contain these keywords, right? So I have a general idea. I have a list of papers from these top conferences, and I will now start to go through it. So I now say have 5 papers with the name health, medical, clinical, or gene in it, right? And I will try to go through the papers. Now, how to go through the paper? It is again a big topic, but just few points is that just read the abstract. That is a starting paragraph. Do you find it interesting or not? Read the abstracts of all the papers, that 5 to 10 papers that you have. Now try to cluster them based on how you like it. Suppose you saw that 4 papers are around the same domain or doing something together. You first clustered them. So you have 4, 4, 2 papers. Now you choose one which you like the best. So you choose with one. Now you have a group of 4 related papers from a top conference. So why am I emphasizing a top conference? There are many reasons for it. First reason for a top conference is that the paper will be written in a very readable manner. So it will not be written in a complicated fashion. So if you read the abstract and the introduction part, it will be very easy to read. Second, these papers generally make their code bases publicly available. So it is a good place to start with. Third, this paper, since it is so nicely written, if you just read the related work section of the paper, you will get a very good understanding of what are the existing works that have been done, what are the research gaps there, and what are the research gap that particular paper are solving. If you just read their related work section, and since it is a top conference paper, it means that the so that area is an interesting area to work in. So now you have an interesting area which is published in a top conference, and you have some code bases usually available there. From that point, so see, you had a general idea, you still do not have the problem statement at hand, right? After reading these 4 papers, so now these 4 papers that you will have, you try to read it in detail. In detail, I mean, after you read abstract, you read introduction and the related works. You do not read methods, you do not read results, you do not read conclusion. You only read, so initially you were only reading the abstract. Now you are expanding, you are reading abstract, introduction and literature and the related works part. Okay. From these 4 papers. And you try to understand the domain, see if you there are some words that is missing, you cannot understand, try to Google it or read the corresponding paper. So this part will take some time because you are new to that domain. To get up to date with uh, the existing knowledge in the research community, it will take some time. Like, so you can take the time, but you have the advantage is that you already have the, usually you have the code base, you know it is very interesting topic, and the problem statement is somewhat already defined for you, so you do not need to redefine it at this stage, right? So after the problem ideation stage comes the verification stage. Verification stage, what I mean that you can have many problem ideas, like out of those 4 or 5 papers, or you read more papers, your friend told you some papers, uh, somehow, or your supervisor told you some papers, and you have 2 3 ideas, but broad ideas, they did not tell you particularly, but some broad ideas you have. Now which one to select? As I told in the first, to make a research project first, you should be very focused. Focused meaning you should be able to say no to things which you think is not necessary. So from these 3 ideas, choose only one idea. Now how to choose? What are the some of the points you can keep in mind? That is what I mean by the verification stage. First check whether the code base for that particular paper is available or not. If it is a top conference paper, usually it is available. If it is an industry paper, they do not make the code base available. So only go, I will recommend at the start, only go with papers or only consider papers as baseline models if they have a code base already available, which usually the top conference paper will have. If that particular paper does not have the code base, do not consider that paper. Do not try to implement the entire paper from scratch. So it is just a waste of your time. Do not do that. So if there is an area where you see there are no reproducible papers, do not select that area. So these are some broad points I will say. Like first, the code base, if it is reproducible or not. Second, when you do this literature survey part, like in the previous step, when you are trying to read the related works part of the paper, you have to then think, like after doing this 4 5 related works, do you think all the problems that are mentioned in the related works are they already solved, or do you think that still there is scope of, like still it is an open area, because you generally need 1 year to publish, will it still be relevant after 1 or 2 years or not? These 2 things you have to these 2 are the actionable points that you need to keep in mind after you do this, the previous step. Like literature survey, is the area matured or not? If not matured, what are the research gaps there? Identify point 1, point 2, point 3. Okay, for solving point 1, like then see the respective code bases. These papers, suppose there are 5 papers, 3 of them have code bases, so you remove the other 2 papers, you only focus on the 3 papers, right? And you see, and you have the code bases. So now you have a general problem idea, you have done the literature survey, you have the code base with you. The next step will be setting up the baseline, right? This part is that since you already have the code base and you think that the area is not already matured, then what you do, you try to implement the code base. So a typical code base means these each of these points I will go in future seminars in detail, but this is just to give you an overview of the basic steps. So like you take a GitHub repo, you like there is in the readme file, you will see that they have steps. Like first they will tell you to set up the conda environment. Then they will tell you, okay, how to generate the data set if it is private. Third, they will tell you, okay, how to train the model. Fourth, how to reproduce the, says in the paper they reproduce that this model achieves this much accuracy. Then they will tell you, okay, you run this command and you will get the same value there. So you try to follow those commands that are follow those instructions that are present, and you try to reproduce the code base in that way. Okay. So now usually it is a good idea to select a field which has 2 to 3 baseline models. So do not go with an area where you have only one baseline model. It is very difficult towards when you try to publish the paper. So if you at the start only select areas where you have 2 3 baseline models whose code bases are already available. If you don't see an area like that, you try to go to problem ideation step again. So do not go to this step where the third step, where is the pointer? Yeah. Do not go to this step unless and until it satisfies these properties. Like there is at least 2 to 3 baseline models with reproducible with code bases available, which you can then reproduce. So now what you have say 3 code bases which you are able to reproduce. This part will also take some time. Some parts can be hard coded, so you really need to understand the code. You have to go through it, make some changes to make it running. So this part will also take some time. Once it is running, you have to then conduct something called as error analysis or ablation study, which is to understand, okay, so these are the 3 state-of-the-art models. What are its drawbacks? Meaning, in which scenario does it fail? What are the limitations of the current model? Some of the limitations will be directly written in the paper. For them, you can just try something like some small experiments to check that. Others can be, you can write your own test set to evaluate, okay, like you can make some example, adversarial examples and put it in and see if that the model is able to understand those discrepancies. So at the end of this stage, you'll understand, okay, what are the errors that are still present by the model. Meaning they will help you to choose, okay, now you have, say, these are the 3 state-of-the-art models and they have these 3 errors, suppose. From these 3 errors, now what you have to do is that you have to select, okay, I will try to do only one of those errors. So after the baseline, you have the baseline setup. You now know that, okay, there are the 3 errors. I want to now solve any one of those errors. What you do is that you select the best performing model from there. We call it SOTA. SOTA meaning state of the art model, right? You select the state of the art model. You think, okay, if I add these extra components, so there the part of novelty comes, which you will get some idea when you read the literature survey, like how other people tried to solve the same problem. Can I do something in that regard, right? So there you try different ways of adding components. By components, I will explain it a little later, but one simple way I can say is that suppose you see that in your text classification system, there is a particular class, say happy, right? So that particular class you see is very dependent on surface words, meaning those words do not require context. Meaning if I just write joy or excited or overjoyed, it is always results in the happy, like it always results in the happy label. If those words are present, it will always be in the happy, it will always be predicted as happy in that way. So what you can do, you can, along with the deep learning model, you can train us a smaller machine learning model, say a TF-IDF based SVM model, and you also take that prediction as input. Meaning, you say that if that particular SVM model is predicting something with confidence more than say 80% or 90%, I will consider that as the predicted model for that particular class, suppose. So in some way you add some components, or you say that this is the input text, I modify the input text so that some extra information is present. So I introduce a pre-processing module which will modify the original input into a newer modified input which will improve the performance. So there can be a post-processing module. So you do not change the anything in the input part, you change in the output part. So before giving the prediction, you do something so that the model improves. Or it can be an algorithmic improvement, meaning in the model itself, you say increase the number of layers, you may include say dropout, you change the value there, you only add dropout at certain layers, you do not add dropout to different layers. Some kind of different components or tweaks you try to make, which you think has some justification, and see whether the performance improves or not, right? Once the performance improves, then you have a research project more or less towards the end, meaning you now have a problem which you have solved and you are able to achieve improved performance. So in general, so I think this will give you an overall idea of what a research project is. Once you have a research project done, when you try to publish it, it is another step. So if you think as a research project, it is like 60% of the work. When you try to convert this research project into a research paper article, there is 40% more work to be done. Because till now what you have just said that, okay, I have a model which is improving over some metric. But is the model really improving or not? You have to show through more experiments. You have to increase baselines. Uh, you have to show many corner cases how sensitive it is. Does it work in other similar models, or is it learning something based on this data set only? Meaning, is it generalizable enough or not? So then comes, since you have some improvement, then the point comes, how does it work in other cases, which is more 40% work. So yeah, so that is all for today.